Okay. Thank you very much to all the speakers. That's a great basis to start the discussion. I'm going to ask one question of each of you, and then we'll open it up to the floor. Mehrzad, let me start with you and ask you to talk a little bit about what you see as the obstacles that are looming ahead, assuming the U.S. And Iran actually do begin negotiations. Then I'm going to ask Ray to answer the question he didn't, which is who do you think would represent the United States if there is a back channel? For Meir, I'm going to ask whether you really believe the Iranians would go all the way to make a nuclear weapon, and isn't there a great concern that an attack on Iran would actually provoke the thing that you fear the most? And then finally, I wanted to get a little bit more from you, if I may, Professor Haykel, on how you would manage and contain Iran, assuming we don't get a resolution or Iran actually does go all the way and makes nuclear weapons. Do you see a restoration of this kind of military alliance between Saudi Arabia and the United States that has been so controversial in the past? Thanks.
Okay, so in regard to the obstacles, I think first and foremost, let's remind ourselves that we have 34 years of accumulated animosity between the two sides. And therefore, both on the Iranian and the American sides, there are a lot of people who are very much opposed to any type of normalization of relations. We find these people in the intelligence security apparatuses of Iran. We see them in the U.S. Congress and think tanks in this city and many other places. So that's number one. Number two is what I call the damn clock problem. Look, in the next set of months, we have a number of important events that can torpedo this type of negotiations. In January, perhaps Hillary Clinton will be out of her job, and a new person needs to come and establish his or her team and get things started. In February, we are going to have the Israeli elections. In March, we are going to have the Iranian New Year holiday, which basically means the country is closed for business for a long time. And then, of course, in June, we have the presidential elections in Iran. So these four events that are looming in the calendar, I think, are going to be responsible in this regard. Now, in terms of other obstacles, as I said, I think one other problem that can bring everything down will be overreach on the part of the U.S. or once again, repeating the mistakes of the past. In other words, putting an offer on the table that we know the Iranians are not going to, agree to. This can be done for domestic consumption and so forth and so on. But I think the end result is going to be that we are not going to move an inch forward. It seems to me that, very much we know what the contours of a compromise formula are really all about, right? Enrichment to this type of percentage, inspections by the IAEA, and of course on the Iranian side, lifting of the sanctions and things of that nature. We need to also keep in mind about how in the past we reached agreements such as the one that was engineered by the Turks and the Brazilians. And again, that didn't amount to much. So, my life philosophy is pessimism of intellect and optimism of will. And this is the approach that I adopt in regard to the prospect of any type of negotiations between Iran and the U.S. And one last point I want to mention is also among the Iranian expatriate community too, there is a lot of resistance to this notion of negotiation between the two sides because of the assumption that any type of negotiations with Iran is basically going to give the regime a new lease on life and basically ensure their existence. And again, not that this is a major factor. These guys, the expat community, doesn't necessarily have much leverage, but I think it's also a factor that can complicate the public diplomacy that will come about, because of Iran's horrible human rights record and so forth.
Very good. Ray?
Yeah, I think this is working. The way this issue has been structured, it tends to be nestled in the Office of Political Directors. That was a decision made in 2005. Didn't have to be there. That's where it was. and it has persisted in the Office of Political Directors. I think if there are any negotiations between the United States and Iran, they're likely to be taking place in the context of 5+1, and that essentially means that the Office of Undersecretary is likely to be responsible for that. I'm not sure if there will be there'll be an individual independent of that. If I was the Undersecretary, I wouldn't want that. So I think that's where it's likely to rest. It's rested there for past 10 years. And this is an issue that's, despite all these sort of ebbs and flows of hysteria, is marked by continuity. There's nothing if you've been around this issue for a while, there's nothing you haven't seen before. The years of decision. 2013 is a year of decision. I remember John Hanna telling me 2007 was a year of decision. So everything sort of, it's like Groundhog Day, right? Every day starts with, I Got You, Babe by Sonny and Cher. And people who come into this issue sporadically think that's new. And there's nothing remarkably dynamic about this. But, at some point there'll be some decisions that have to be made. I'm not sure if they're there yet. And everybody has an incentive to kind of procrastinate.
Yeah, I always like to say with Iran, failure has 1,000 fathers and success is an orphan. So would you talk, Meir, a little bit about, do you really think Iran would develop a weapon, and isn't a military strike counterproductive?
First of all, I don't know, to be frank. But I can say that Iran may go all the way if it feels that it will be allowed to do so. That is, if there is no price entailed, then why shouldn't they go all the way? If, on the other hand, there is a certain price for it, then the Iranians may stop at some point. There's an Israeli person, one of the Israeli security men says that Iran will not cross a red line. Iran will cross or will try to push many tiny pink lines. That is, they will try to push the red line all the way. But again, I have no idea whether or not they will go all the way. I do agree that an Israeli attack on Iran is most likely to produce a nuclear Iran at some point, because it will be extremely difficult for the Iranians to sustain the humiliation of being attacked by Israel and then not going all the way. On the other hand, if there is an attack by international coalition, obviously the military effects of such an attack would be much greater, and then it will be much more difficult for Iran to try to go all the way if they would decide to do so.
In response to your question, basically your question is about the future of the U.S.-Saudi relationship. And I'm of the view, and the latest discussions about the nature of this relationship has to do with this new talk here in the United States of energy independence, and that shale gas and oil will make North America independent, and therefore our need for Saudi oil will become less important, and therefore we can afford as Americans to scale back or perhaps even abandon the Saudi regime. I think this would be, talk like this is very dangerous, and it's in fact very myopic because of the nature of the international oil business. America cannot be an autarkic country when it comes to oil, and the amount of the relationship and the projection of force into the region, I don't think can be scaled back without very serious consequences. The other point about the military relationship, I think it's already there in that the United States, according to the New York Times, the United States exported $74 billion worth of weapons last year, 33 billion of which were to Saudi Arabia. So the Saudis are major buyers of U.S. weapons, and I can't imagine that they are not therefore very closely knit to any possible military strategy that the United States has in the region. And so I would predict that if Iran does go down the nuclear route, that the relationship between the Saudis and the Americans will become much stronger still.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's open it up now. Raise your hand if you have a question, and wait for a microphone to come to you, and identify yourself if you would, please. I see, we have a microphone set up there, so please line up if you have questions. Okay, all right, yeah, go ahead.
Yes, hello, my name is Hassan. I was born in Tehran, and I have a NGO called Global Bridges for Humanity. And my question is to all the panelists, and please don't give me a yes or no answer, just give a little bit of explanation. As we've discussed here, it seems that Iran is a powerful country and is Muslim as a religion and has a large or great influence in region and is capable to protect our national security interests as a natural ally in that area. Unlike the people of Israel, do you think a divorce between Israel and U.S. is in progress?
It's quite a question. Well, is there a divorce in progress between the U.S. and Israel? I have to say I haven't detected one, but I'll defer to our Israeli panelist. I would actually, let me amplify that a little bit. There's been a lot written about the fact that Prime Minister Netanyahu bet on the wrong horse in the American elections. Do you think that there's going to be some weakening of the U.S.-Israeli alliance, a little bit of a chill between Obama and Netanyahu, who seems likely to be reelected in your elections in January?
There might be obviously a problem or a brewing problem in Israeli-American relations following Netanyahu's wrong betting in American elections. There's of course also the possibility that if there's no progress in any other field in the Middle East, it will negatively affect Israeli-American relations. On the other hand, there are other factors that may mitigate such a problem. But I think that, again, as an Israeli, I would say that Israel has to pay greater attention to preserving its position in the U.S. by behaving, again, cautiously and smartly.
Anybody else want to touch that one? No? Okay, next question.
Yeah, my name is Gabriel. I'm from UMBC, University of Maryland, Baltimore County. I'm a political science student. And the question actually follows his question is, how much weight does the backing of the United States have on the decision that Israel will make, either a strike or wait, if the negotiations happen or not? How much weight does that have?
I guess that's for you again. Does Israel get to have a say in whether the United States attacks Iran?
No, as far as I know, the U.S. is a sovereign country, so I don't think that Israel will decide what America will do. I think that if America acts, it will do so based on its own calculations. The Israelis can maybe beg, implore, beseech, urge. I don't think they can decide or will decide what the U.S. will do, especially not in a second-term president. I think it also has to do a lot with what the Iranians will do. I mean, Middle East is not only one side show. There are many players here.
Yeah, I think so. Over here.